Hey, what's up? This is Nello Johnson from Nello Johnson Photography. So today I'm making a video on for people who may be just getting into retouching and wondering where is it do I start off when it comes to retouching. So this video is sponsored by Glamour Panel Retouching, and I'm going to use some of their stuff that they have in the panel. It's not going to be in-depth, but it's just to show you what are the first 1, 2, 3, 4 steps you might want to consider. This is not a basics, like you don't have to follow these steps, but this is the steps where I go, and I feel sure about 50% of photographers or even more probably in some way follow in these steps. So the first thing you want to do is wherever you started your image off from, whether that be in Lightroom or in Capture One or whatever, you want to make some adjustments in your highlight, shadows and stuff like that. So in this example, let's say if you have a fresh raw image, you make a duplicate of it. Try and always never work on the original background. Save that, so you make a duplicate, and let's say you jump in straight into Photoshop. So then you would make your first set of adjustments in Camera Raw, and just look at the image and determine what do you want to do. You want more highlights, it's too much highlights, you want more exposure, more whites, black, whatever, stuff like that. Usually these two I would prefer not bordering with vibrant and saturation. Neither would I really bother with this, but you can bother with white balance if you feel the image is not right. But I trust my camera and other photographers I work with. I'm quite happy with the color, but if you want to, you can try auto, which I hate because it's not right, or you can try to do it yourself, try to tweak it to your liking. So these are the first steps that you want to play with. Usually I would play with exposure, highlights, shadows, whites, and that's about it. But if you want to, you can use more of these, but that's the way how I start off. Already this image has already been through that stage, so, and usually it doesn't take long. It takes about a minute or even less, so there's nothing to really fuss over about or get too all jumpy about. The second thing I like to do is sharpen your image, and we're going to sharpen our image quickly by using the Glamour Retouch Panel, and it's just a matter of click. I'm going to use the second sharpen because I like it much more, and you might have not seen that, but let's zoom in closer so you can see what it done. Look at her eye, and you see the little bit of blur. So original, and now the sharpen. And you can crank by default the sharpening is I think 33%, and you can really crank that up as much as you feel like. I think the default setting is quite fine for most images, but if you need to, there's plenty of headroom to really crank up that sharpness, and as you can see, before and after. And if you're using this panel, which I will highly recommend, or if you're not using this panel, another way I can show you is I would usually go in others, and I would go with sharpen, unsharp mask, and I would have my amount at 100 and the radius at 2.7 and the threshold at 0. And again, let's zoom in, and it basically almost does the same thing, but it's just a more of a step. And one thing I learned about in retouching, time is everything. The faster you can get something done. So even though this basically doing the same thing as with this is a little bit more powerful on the retouching, on the Glamour Retouch Panel. It has more leeway, it's more powerful, but most importantly, it's much more quicker. It's just a couple of seconds, whereas in this I need to make a couple of steps. And so trust me, this little bit of even though it might only feel like a couple of seconds or extra minute just to go through all this in Photoshop versus this, all of that really adds up when you spend so much minutes and hours and dozens and hundreds of different editing photos, any little advantage to speed up your workflow is a big plus in the long run. So once you then get your image sharpened, the next step I would do, or the next step a lot of photographers would do actually, is set what we call a look. But before we do that, the next thing I think you want to do is figure out the crop of your image. In this case, this image has already been cropped, but you can crop this at any stage within this part right here, in the beginning or right now. So you figure out the crop that you want and you go with that. That's that. Again, never work on the original image. Try never to work on the original image. So the duplicate. So from there, what a lot of photographers would do is set what we like to call a contrast look. And again, this panel offers that on a click of a button, but I will show you the long way, or how you do it in Photoshop, or how I do it, or how I used to do it in Photoshop. Thanks to this panel, it really speeds up my workflow. And setting the contrast look is basically just all about really dropping down bringing up the highlights and dropping down the shadows to really get a look that you're really looking for. You really want strong strong highlights, and a nice deep rich contrast. So it's just a matter of figuring out that look, and if it's too strong, you can play with the opacity. And remember when we was in Camera Raw, I said I didn't want it to play with the vibrance and saturation, because sometimes setting this contrast look using curves, you may need to then go to the hue sat, and I would usually click the eyedropper tool and figure out what the problem is. And a lot of cases is red. The image tends to get a little bit too red, and I would just bring that down a little bit. But again, you can find it in this panel and that I have here, the Glamour Retouch Panel, but I will go into more depth in that panel and other videos that I got coming up. So this is just how to start your retouching workflow. Then the next thing, once we have already set a contrast look, I would then go for a overall look. This is something I can do now, or this is something I can do later, but for now we'll do that later. So we just put these in a group, that, and where is group? Yes, so we just put those there in a group, so it's there in a group. So the next thing you want to focus on is the hard retouching, and this is all about getting rid of all these different imperfections. There is no one tool, but there's 3 tools I like to use, and that's this tool, the spot healing brush. I would use this spot healing brush with different blend modes. Lighten mode gets rid of dark stuff, and darken mode gets rid of light stuff. Let's say like this highlight, if you want to try to get rid of that. But if you want more control, you can go with the healing brush, and it's a little bit more slow. Again, try to keep your hardness. Think of hardness as focus. If your image is really turned sharp, you want a hard brush, but usually you want to keep your brush, depending on what you're doing, anywhere between 30 and I would say 60%, depending on how sharp an image is. If you're doing what we call like airbrush, trying to smooth out something, then you would go for a softer brush. But in this case, we want to keep the brush a bit hard. And it's just a matter of, sampling and going about your business. Then the next tool I would use is the clone stamp. I like to use the clone stamp a lot for getting rid of hair strands. I really, this is my tool for getting rid of hair strands, but you can also use it on the skin. and I'm using a Wacom tablet, so I would highly suggest a lot of times if you're using this tool to also have a tablet. But if you don't have a pressure tablet, you can just lower the opacity or whatever and try to work with it like that. But in these two cases, these two tools, I would highly recommend that if you have a pressure sensitivity tablet. In this spot healing brush, no, you don't need a tablet for that one. And you don't really need a tablet for the healing brush as well, but the clone stamp you definitely would want to have a tablet. The next tool I would use is the patch tool, and I would use the patch tool for getting rid of big stuffs. So usually in the beginning, the patch tool will be the first retouching tool I use to get rid of large stuff. I would just keep using the patch tool and you get the hang of it and you start to move quick. And once I get rid of those big stuff, then I would start using my other three tools to get rid of the more smaller stuff and working around and working around and working around. Once I get the image to a good pace, I mean to a good way how I want it to be, depending on how much more the client want the image to be retouched. Some clients may be fine, some clients might want the image to go down more. One thing that is very popular, and I'm going to give it where this come from, all of these different retouching technique, what they like to call softening of the skin. A lot of this come from magazines way back in the day, something called airbrushing, which they don't really, not everyone really does anymore. But a lot of this softening of skin come from airbrushing, and today the new version of airbrushing is what we would call frequency separation. And once I get all the imperfections and all that kind of stuff deal with, I would then inspect my photo, and there are cases where you would need to fix the eyebrows and eyelashes, and what I would basically do is make a new layer of that, and then I would just, whatever tools I need, I would just start to clean up the eyebrows and stuff like that. Just, these little hair, and clean up any little thing like this, and so on and so on and so on. Then again, I would inspect the image once I get all of that done. Then another problem I sometimes would find is the nose. I would make another layer for that, and all my layers I would name them. I would give them a name, and then I would clean up the nose, because sometimes I clean up the nose so far and then I need to lower the opacity sometime in the nose and then merge that back down with the other set of layers. Then I would inspect my image again, and then usually it's the hair, and then I would make another layer again, and then I would start cleaning up what parts of the hair I want to be cleaned up, and I will start to go over inspecting the image again. And usually when I clean up hair, I would just name it hair, and that means any removal of maybe any hair. It might be something, sometimes even hair here. Once that's all said and done, I would inspect my images and I would see if I need to do any anything with the liquefy tool, if I need to clean up the lips a little bit more. And once all that is done, most of my main work is done, then it's time for the finish coat, or I can just present the image as it is and set a color. But a lot of clients want the skin a little bit more smoother, and so I would run the frequency separation. And if you don't know what frequency separation is, I'm gonna have another video coming for that. It's basically a tool that's, you can almost call it airbrushing. This helps to even out the skin texture and color, and to get rid of some of that imperfection as well. So we're going to use the frequency separation that comes with the Glamour Retouch Panel, and all you do is basically paint with a white brush, and I like to rotate my image. I usually paint in the direction the skin is going, and by default it's by 50%, but just for demo purpose I'm going to crank it up to 100% so you can see. And let's zoom in really close so you can see. because sometimes YouTube compresses, yeah, all the time YouTube compresses the images, so you can't, sometimes it's hard to really see what's going on. And as you can see, this tool is very powerful, especially in this panel. There's many ways of using frequency separation, but the way how it's laid out in this panel is very simple. My 10-year-old daughter uses my computer and grab images that I give her, and she knows exactly what to do. It's that simple. But frequency separation on the whole is not as simple as I'm making it sound right now. It's only thanks to software like the Glamour Retouch Panel and so on that it really takes away all that stress of knowing how to actually create this in Photoshop and so on. I'm sure you can find videos out there on YouTube on how to create the frequency separation, and once you've seen the videos you might get intimidated, but running this panel and just running the script and using frequency separation just takes away all that headache, and you just paint away. And as you can see, all those little blemishes and stuff are just magically going away. So it's very powerful. If you're very lazy and you don't feel like doing all that retouching of cleaning up skin, this is really powerful. And again, it is more powerful in the Glamour Retouch Panel. It's very powerful. So let's straighten up the image so we can see what's going on here, and let's show you before and after. And as you can see, that has made a huge difference, a huge difference. And again, you can play with the opacity to however you feel like, less or more. It's up to you, you know. And it's really powerful, I have to say. Once I have already done that and established all of that, I will just slowly inspect my image for any little thing. At this point, before you use frequency separation, you want to make sure you get just about everything on the image as clean up as you want, because think of frequency separation as a finished paint on the house. You're getting ready to build a new house, and some of the last things you're going to do is paint the house. I mean, get ready to prime the house and paint it and so on. So think of frequency separation as that. It's best to deal with all your imperfections and always go back and forward inspecting your image, you know, for any little imperfection. Sometimes I would zoom in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out, or just walk, you know, get a glass of water and then come back and then take a look at my image again. And sometimes I can see stuff that jumps out at me, like maybe the eyeball and stuff like that. When you're using frequency separation, never paint in the eyeball. It's a big no-no. So don't paint in the eyeball and avoid stuff like that. Once that's all said and done, and I'm quite happy with the way all my images come out, the last thing I like to do is, again, I would create another curves, but this time this curves would be for setting the color look. You don't have to run this if you don't want to. If you're quite happy with the look that you have in your image, then it's quite fine. But if you want to really add some spice and some color, more color to your image, this is something I like to do. And I would run the curves and I would go in the channels and I would just play with you know, the shadows and the highlight, and just try to create a look. Go in the greens, go in the blues, and just try to create a really like magazine look. I like to go for. I do a lot of commercial stuff, so a lot of times I have a lot of Victoria's Secret magazines, Vogue magazines, so I have a pretty good idea the type of look I'm going for, and the clients already know who I'm working with, that the type of look I'm going for. So you just go in these curves and just play around to set a look that you like. But again, I cannot stress but say you can find a lot of these inside the Glamour Retouch panel. Let's just choose one. Let's see, sunny, red, green, warm, cool. Let's try this one, warm, cool. And as you can see, on just one click, by using this panel, I was able to dramatically, you know, change the look character. And In some ways this kind of works with this, and you can play with the opacity to drop it down, because if you really look at this image, it's a bit of a beauty vintage kind of a image. So this kind of a look right here I think really fits this image really well, and you can play with the opacity if you want more or less. And at the end of this, I would inspect my image one more time, and if I want to, in a lot of cases, I just might add let's see if I can find it. I just might add another sharpening, and so on. And I also might add some sharpening to the eyes and the lips, and you know just those little final steps to make stuff pop out. But again, this was just a general walkthrough of the steps you go through if you're doing beauty retouching or people retouching and stuff like that. Obviously there's much more stuff you can get into if you need to, if you want to really push the lips even more, but this is just a general guidelines for when you're just getting into retouching. And always remember, only retouch as far as who it is, the client who you're dealing with, dealing with, and so on. Because personally, this retouching thing, a lot of people think this is something that takes about 20 or 30 minutes. This type of retouching can take anywhere from 45 minutes to 2 hours to 6 hours to 9 hours. I've had images where I spent basically 4 or 5 hours just retouching the hair alone. Hair retouching is very complicated. So it's very serious, and once you really master this, it's very rewarding how far you can push your image and so on and create different looks. So again, thank you for watching, and there's going to be much more videos coming up on the Glamour Retouch Panel, also some how-to videos, tips and tricks with Photoshops and so on. I'm also giving away, I'm going to be working along with other photographers, raw image for anyone who's looking for raw images to retouch on high quality raw images to learn retouching and so on. So they are now available on my website, and there will be I guess links maybe on other photographers' website promoting the same thing as well, but we shall see. But thank you again for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you again in the next video.